Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Good evening, dear great leaders, scholars, lovers of knowledge. Thank you so much for everyone who's here tonight. It's our last session for the year. And we've had a bumper year. We had a very interesting 2024, and it's so good that tonight we are closing, or this is our final chapter of this book that we've been reading the whole year. My name is Mazwe Majola. I'm from the Worldwide Institute of Leadership and Development. We are very passionate about leadership development because we have realized that great leaders constantly develop themselves. That if you want to be a great leader, you've got to constantly develop yourself, because leadership, it's not a destination, but it's a journey. We all rise and fall on leadership. And what a wonderful time we have had the whole year. And tonight we are closing that chapter, as I've said. Of course, as some of our colleagues have already gone to holidays, but we will continue with our platform or our session as we always do. And tonight we discussing a very interesting session, a very interesting topic, and then we've got a wonderful, one of the best leaders in our country, and I'm so glad that we managed to secure him. And then we will be discussing, or I'll be introducing him shortly, the speaker that will be addressing us tonight. May I welcome our members and our regulars, and also a special welcome to those who are joining us for the first time. If you are here for the first time, you've never joined us before, you are most welcome. And thank you so much for joining us. And please feel at home, relaxed, and enjoy the session. And please do participate. This is a safe space, and this is the community of leaders. So if you are here, you are with or you are rubbing shoulders with great leaders. So please do participate. We'd like to hear and we'd like to learn a lot from you. So tonight, as I've said, that we are discussing the topic creating sustainability and resilience, key pillars of modern leadership. How to create a sustainable and resilient using some key pillars that we'll find in modern leadership. And we be addressed by my brother, my brother Tshepo Kgobe. Welcome. Let me just introduce you quickly, just to respect you. I know that you've got a very long CV, but we just read your short bio as we are introducing you, and then you can address us. But thank you so much for joining us tonight and for availing yourself to this community of leaders. So, ladies and gentlemen, here it's Mr. Tshepo Kgobe. He's the Chief Executive Officer at Gauteng Management Agency. Tshepo Kgobe, he's a multidisciplinary engineer with more than 24 years of extensive experience in managing complex projects and operations with diverse technical requirements in infrastructure, energy and mining, working predominantly in the railway environment. Kgobe joined the GMA in 2014 as the Senior Executive Manager responsible for the technical services unit. This is his second stint on the Gautrain Rapid Rail Link project. At the start of Gautrain, he was responsible for the engineering and project management of the track work subsystem. He stepped into the position of Chief Operating Officer in 2020 and has a novel commercial vision for the GMU. Over the last 4 years, he has been the program manager for the integrated fare management. The program includes the development of a single ticketing system, a transport management center, a data management platform, and an ITS communications backbone. Through this, he has further grown his expertise in technology space. Kgobe has been in the railway industry since the beginning of his career, and although he went into consulting for a while, he ended up in the railway sector. You could say, I have trains in my veins, open quote and close quote. He started his career as a civil engineer in KwaZulu-Natal and specialized in rail program and project management. At the start of his career, he worked in the Durban region as a pairway and facilities operations line manager. He was previously in senior engineering manager at Metro Rail's head office in pathway and structures. He has 12 years experience as a director on the board of various companies where he was responsible for businesses development, broad-based black economic empowerment, transformation, corporate social investment, and supply development. Tshepo Kgobe has also practiced in the rail industry with various international companies, including Chorus Rail Consultancy in the UK. His international work experience gives him the edge to perform at a global scale. That is Tshepo Kgobe, ladies and gentlemen. My brother, once again, with humility, we are very glad. I know that you are a most busy person, or the busy person, and personally, really, I don't take this for granted. I know you put so many things aside to accommodate us, and thank you for that. Here is the leaders. If you can address us. This is our last session for the year. We have been meeting, as you know, weekly, the whole year with different leaders and with different topics. So we are so happy that tonight we are discussing creating sustainability and resilience with some novel pillars or key pillars of modern leadership. Thank you so much, my brother. Over to you. You can address us now. And then once you have addressed us, only then we'll engage with you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Prof. I'm going to deal with the conversation in two parts. For a minute, I'm going to switch off my camera as I do the presentation, and then when I go to the speech. So I will deal with the presentation on the technical side on issues that we need to deal with, and then I will talk to things that we don't talk about in leadership, which is personal growth and the things that we have to look out for. So in as much as the years of being in leadership, what they've led me to be able to understand is that after a while, the technical bits, they are important, but they do not keep leadership running properly. So we'll also deal with personal development related issues. So if you could allow me, I'm going to share my screen. I want to deal with innovation in public transport, but I want to deal with three things that I think every leader should actually be concentrating on and be worrying about as we continue on, what do they call it, in this space. And I'm going to use public transport as the space that I know very well. And I want to talk about, there's a number of things to talk about, but the more important things that we want to talk about. It is said that longevity is in this business is about being able to reinvent yourself and or inventing the future in itself. And the question that one always asks themselves in these spaces is, how does one reinvent the future, and how does somebody manage that? I'll deal with the context, and then I'll look at some of the things that had been brought up. There's a bit of a typo. There's priorities and the issue of generative AI out competing with technology, and then the path to net zero. And then I'll look at a few examples before I jump onto the other part of the conversation, which is the personal growth part. In my business, there's what do they call it? There's a space that is very interesting, in the sense that my future committer is completely different. It's the kind of person who has an increased demand for variety. Time and cost savings are important to them. High technology adoption is a big issue. The interesting thing is the future committer has no need for a vehicle. So a vehicle for them, when we grew up, the ownership of an internal combustion vehicle was one of those things that you aspired to have. And that's when we start talking about the difference between, the youngsters that talk about access versus ownership. They live a completely different life. They want to have the ability to be able to up and leave anytime they want. So they don't want a car that they have probably bought on higher purchase holding them down, and with them not being able to shut down that what they call it, that loan. They have a great increase for access to information, a high demand for convenience. And what this does is that means we have to think differently about our business and think about the transport of the future. There's also the bit of that we also need to be able to understand that is semi-permanent as a change. People don't no more travel at the same time. They no more buy tickets the same way. The location of where they work is completely different. CBDs are dead. One of my one of my former sort of people who have interviewed speaks about the glutton of what do they call it, of property, and the glut that is property that a lot of people now own. So a lot of buildings are empty in the CBDs, and even in Sandton, we're seeing 30% occupancy issues in that space, or what do they call it, vacancies in that space. Then the demographics is who's traveling, the more younger, lower income customers, fewer customers, and fewer tourists. The tourists are coming back now, but they're coming back slowly. I mean, I've just come back from Morocco last week for a UITP meeting, and there is a lot of tourists coming into the country. So it's going to be a bumper season for us as a country in terms of the arrivals. There's no consensus whether people are traveling for leisure or they're traveling for business. So in essence, what that does is then says we have to think differently about who is traveling and why are they traveling. Sorry. Now, what that means is that you have to think differently about your business. We have to think about how you're growing your business. Are you growing your business vertically, which means are you becoming 10 times better than anything else, which is what we call the relentless pursuit of better. And that talks to the refinements we're bringing onto our business. And that in itself is a big issue. And then there's also the extensions of the health drain that we speak about, which means we can grow the business horizontally. And that in itself is a big issue. Sorry, excuse me, I have a bit of a challenging pop-up on my screen that keeps on giving me hell. Growth is hard for companies to achieve, and we these three graphs show you how many businesses actually are growing organically, and people who are able to grow their business organically. It's not that many. It's predominantly organic growers. It's about 6% of the businesses that actually are able to grow Inorganic growth, which means acquiring other businesses, acquiring other ways, and pivoting their business from what do they call it, what it is, and changing their business towards a different, completely different business model. This is an important issue because when you then are able to understand that the business that you run today might not be fit for tomorrow, and therefore you have to think differently about, if you look at this, it says only 13% of the companies globally actually manage to grow at a rate higher than 10%, which means everybody is lagging behind. And those out of that 13%, only 6% has managed to grow their business predominantly on an organic growth basis. And then this also says to you, we have a challenge. Those are people who are growing more inorganically are the ones that are growing the best. In our business, we have to leverage what we have from the infrastructure that we have that's already built, that is owned by government. A lot of people don't actually know that the Gauteng is actually owned by the Gauteng government. It's a 45 billion rands asset that we built 14 years ago, and we own it. And yes, it is operated by a private company, but it is an asset that actually government owns. And we also have an urban development around it that has taken place that we're not in control of. And the greater part of it is we've been of great impact for our citizens as a whole. We can't ignore the fact that COVID has happened. And the questions that one has to ask is, how do you get out of where we were? I mean, we went from that 1 month where we had no services at all to where now we are rebuilding a business overall. This is a trajectory that we've built for ourselves. But the question I had always asked, if you could look at the point TP, which is this point here, that was a turning point in our business in 2017 when we were so overcrowded that people didn't want to, travel with us, and we needed to do something. And then COVID just exacerbated the problem. And the question is, where does our new growth come, and where does it come from? And in turn, one has to ask, how do you think differently about your business, and how do you actually make that 10 times pivoting? A report by McKinsey spoke about 8 priorities for CEOs in 2024. And these will probably continue into, what do they call it, into 2025. Generative AI goes from, artificial intelligence goes from proof of concept to scale. We're now using it all the time. It's in essence, the last time I ever typed an email in full, it's probably a few months ago. We've got Copilot now. All I have to type is the concept of of the email, and I say, generate with or draft with Copilot, and Copilot then drafts the whole email. All I have to do is I have to read it for completeness and understanding. And what you're getting to understand is that human capability is being moved up the hill to where it really needs to be, where we make decisions rather than us doing menial work. How to compete with technology, and then the move to net zero. I will deal with the first 3 issues as what they call it of key issues that I want to deal with tonight. The road to growth, it's a big issue, but I'm not going to spend that much time on it. The issue of what's your superpower, and that I'll deal with it in terms of, the second part of our conversation on when we talk about, personal growth and how you have to think differently about the way you do things today. The other trend was to love your middle managers. A lot of businesses are stifled by their middle managers. You are incapable of moving forward because those people hold the biggest power in the business. They might not be the best, the best paid, or they have the best power, but they move information. And if you do not take that seriously, then that will stifle your business. Beating the odds, the geopolitics, and a new lens on macroeconomics. The last 2 are simply saying to you, there are no clear trends. So you might as well learn to adapt quicker than we've ever learned to adapt before. Let's look at generative AI. When you look at generative AI in itself, we have to, what do they call it, to be able to bring up a few terms. Because we all talk about generative AI, but we actually do not understand what we're talking about. And people speak easily about generative AI, and they don't really understand. So it's the type of coding that allows computers to actually learn, and where machine learning techniques, where you have APIs or application programming interfaces that have learning capabilities in them. We also have foundation models that you have to understand, which is able to manage vast quantities of unstructured data and even unlabeled data, which is something that we've not been able to do with the human mind so far. GPT or Chat GPT that you use there at the current moment is based on GPT-4 and the different, models that are there. There's also the issue of large language models. And when we start dealing with large language models, it's the kind of AI that generates emails for you, writes large theses for you, and is able to. Now, when you're in various spaces, there's a question of what we call the creative dilemma here. Now, if I were to hire a consultant and they were to use AI to generate all their, what do they call it, all their reports, do those reports actually belong to them? Or in actual fact, they have used other people's information to actually create those reports? These are things that you're going to have to cope with and have to think through. What is the role of, what do they call it, of AI in your business? When you ask people to do work and how they create the work and how they work, which means you'll have to develop a posture of what do they call it, of what you do in your business as a whole. The other two are just processes that you work with in generative AI. This is what do they call it? This is an interesting diagram of the future or the current use of, what do they call it, of AI in public transport. Now, when you understand this model in itself, this goes beyond just a general chatbot. And when you think about using a general chatbot, you are now talking about areas where, customer logs a call, the chatbot responds to him, and it goes into generative AI, asks a few questions, the model receives the user's request, pulls user information and prompt, and then it checks the booking, and then from then on, then it can process it, or then goes out of that model, and then finalizes the booking on this side. Now, as it continues, if the answers do not come easily, the chatbot then communicates with customer services options. And if, what do they call it, and customer service, a human being reviews that and sends it back into the chatbot, and you are able to workflow an entire customer query without you even dealing with it. In actual fact, the ultimate point at which you deal with a customer will be at a point where none of these questions can actually be answered by the chatbot itself. Now, a lot of the chatbots you have that you're using at this point in time are not yet at this level. They're still at, what do they call it, at a rudimentary stage. This is the one that we are working on, and we are redeveloping to make sure that we can. What this allows you to do, it makes customer services or call centers as we used to know them to become very small, which in turn will actually lower the amount of money that you pay for services like that, and will then be able to use very few people in spaces like that. This creates efficiencies, but the question is, what does the current businesses that we have and business models that we have locally mean to this? And as you can see, it's only right at the end that the workflow actually assigns an agent to, what do they call it, to deal with this issue. And this is now the world in which we live. And banks now are now going in the same direction. Every bit of service that used to use, customer services officials are now going into the space where you can then be able to do And the question I get every time I bring up this is always is what becomes the role of the human being long-term wise? Now, the role of the human being is going to be actually elevated to where we are brought back from doing menial tasks to actually being able to think and make more complex decisions and actually think better about how we regenerate these models and rebuild them in such a way that they actually make our lives even better. This is a current a bit of application that we started probably developing during the middle of COVID when we had a few challenges with a lot of our trains being full. And this allows you to book a service and make decisions for yourself on the basis of which trains are full, which trains are available. And all of this sits with what they call it, with the ability for you to do that in an AI database. Now, here's a big issue, and when you look at this, this might be a bit of a, what do they call it, of a complex diagram as a whole, but it's the ability for you to be able to understand one little thing. Hopefully I can get the pointer on. So this is your current ERP platform. This is how small it will be long-term wise. And you need to be able to be clear about it, that your current ERP is actually holding you back in the manner in which it's set up. And you need to be able to create a much bigger open architecture that allows the users and the user experience layer out here on the top to be able to communicate back, be it your workers, be your people that deal with the software that you, and a lot of the work that we have will talk about apps as a service and also software as a service as a bigger part. All you have to do long-term wise is going to be the ability for you to develop policies. The question I always ask when we get here is, what is your company's posture towards AI? Do you have a policy for how AI can be used? Long-term wise, when you look at this whole complex diagram, it asks, do you have the skills and the capability in your business to actually pivot to this point? Do you have the ability and in your, what becomes your HR, your IT units, function? And as you can see, it's about to employing a whole lot more data management services. And if you have not moved to the cloud and you're still on-prem, this mostly relies on, what do they call it, on cloud services. And on-prem services will just skyrocket your, what do they call it, your energy bills as you try and get more servers in, and the cooling of those becomes a big issue. And therefore, you need to be able to ask yourself, do I have the skills? Do I have the capability to do this? There are three ways in which you look at this model. And we always say, are you a taker? Are you a shaper? Or are you a maker? So we start at the end. A maker are people who actually generate AI from scratch. It's software companies that develop AI, and those are few in, what do they call it, and far in between. A shaper is somebody who actually uses AI and then reworks the AI by actually reprogramming it to do what he wants it to do. And then a taker is somebody like anybody else today who uses ChatGPT. You are a taker. You are using a what do they call it? An AI software that is off the market. One of the key issues that you have to be able to consider in that space is the fact that you do not own the data that goes into ChatGPT. ChatGPT owns the data after that. If you are using that for, what do they call it? For very sensitive documents, you have to be able to understand how AI actually functions, because it is the use of various entry points and a lot of the information that sits in a lot of artificial intelligence type software actually are sourced from the users of the, what do they call it, of the software itself. And therefore, what that means is that the information you've entered into a what do they call it, a software like that as a taker becomes public information. Now, these are things you're going to have to consider upfront. Do you have an open data policy as a company? Now, this is a game changer in the sense that it makes it easier for you to do more things, but it also makes you more open to what do they call it, to the dangers that are out there, and also makes you open to the likeliness of you being able to end up with data in an open forum without you knowing and intentionally doing it. So these are things that we say your key role as what do they call it, as somebody who's a leader, has to be developing policy. And then policy is not about you saying, no, there will be no AI used in my company. Get over yourself. Most of your employees today are already using AI. So it is an important decision point that you actually develop policies that ensures that the AI can be used in a responsible manner in order they call it in your company. Now, when you understand this, for us, it's about, train analytics. It's about improving system configuration and integrating health train services into the greater services of what do they call it, transport services as a whole. We cannot do that without understanding our data and managing our data clearly. When you look at this graph here, this is about us looking at where the trains are, where the capacity, so the tall golden towers are actually the train service, and then the blue bits on the bottom are, or the navy blue bits on the bottom are actually the capacity of those trains. What this allows you to be able to do, it allows you to be able to understand. And then on the bottom graph with the squiggly lines, it's actually the entry data from the gate. Now, what that allows us to do, it allows us to be able to see at what point people are coming into the system and what train are they normally taking. So, and at what point do the certain trains get filled up? And also we have a similar graph taking it back. Combining the two data, we're able to create a way in which somebody can then easily be able to be given information at an instant, when to travel and how to travel and how to do what they need to do. AI in transport logistics in itself, one of the key things that you will have to consider is understanding what is a business-led digital roadmap. A lot of people have a digital roadmap that is not business-led. It is not, so the strategy of your business actually creates your digital roadmap. These days, a lot of people, their digital roadmap is actually determining their business strategy. You have to be clear about what you want to achieve as a whole. Secondly is, do you have, what do they call it, the delivery capabilities? And when you're talking about delivery capabilities, do you have the talent? Do you have the right skills and capabilities to innovate and execute? It's about also the operating model. Can you be able to make sure that your business can operate properly with technology, and how do you build technology into your business? Can technology make it easier for your teams to use as you innovate at pace? Now, there's also the bit of the rate at which you innovate is not something that, the change is rapid and and that is why your issue is about you creating more of, what do they call it, of the open policies that then allow for this data, for these technologies to be used in your business. Data and managing data is a big issue, and continually enriching data to make it easily accessible, because a lot of AI models are data hungry, and therefore you gotta be able to transfer your current data from its platforms to actually where you need it to have it. You need to have change management, which is a big issue in managing AI long-term wise. And it's about adoption and scaling and maximizing value and capturing what you need to do. And scaling means you bringing on, bigger and better ways of managing the whole issue. Out competing with technology, a lot of our platforms that we're looking at what is at the current moment, what is architectural promise for the future? It's the ability to have open AI, software modules that are interchangeable, software modules that benefit both the operator and the passenger. And it's about continuous innovation with constant updates and customer involvement, fully scalable modular web-based platforms that can carry millions of transactions at the same time. it has to be standardized but highly configurable with many out-of-the-box functionalities, which means you have to develop on an open basis and an open source basis rather than you using a lot of proprietary technologies. But the open source policies has to also be able to allow for you to be able to have plugins on standard software that you have. This is some of the things we're looking at. We are actually creating a 3D model or what do they call it, a digital twin for our entire network. And the process started probably about 5 years ago when I was the CEO. And we're now looking at how do we develop further from there. We're already talking about a lot of the issues that are out there. Can we remove copper cables? You know, the only ones that we will remain with are the power cables that are going to be pushing the trains. Can we remove copper cables from the system and we don't have train stop because, or trains put at what do they call it, at risk because we have lost copper cables in the system? These are some of the issues that we're looking at. Can we move a lot of our services into the cloud? Now, the third issue that I wanted to deal with was the largest capital, or do they call it, reallocation, the path to net zero. It's a path, it's not a destination. And that is a big issue that we also have to think through and think through what we want to, what do they call it, to achieve as a whole. Now, the path of net zero in itself has no one silver bullet. Now, what this graphic shows you is that if we had to get to net zero today, what would be the annual development for us to have a greater impact on, what do they call it, on the net zero or on the path to net zero? It's about exponential scaling. At the current moment, our wind power capacity, and this is across the globe, so therefore we might find that in South Africa, the wind power deployment would need 10 times what you have today. The solar power capacity would have to do 14 times for us to get to 2030 in one piece, if that's still the goal. Battery electric car sales, if we're removing the internal combustion engine, we will have to be producing and buying cars, electric cars at 14 times the value. Let me remind you that 2025 is in, what do they call it, is in 2 weeks' time. And therefore, the 2030 will literally be 5 years away from, the 2025. Now, that becomes a big issue because if we're consuming electric cars at the rate that we're consuming them at this point in time, 14 times that, it's going to be a completely different thing. Something is going to have to happen. So green hydrogen electrolyzer production, you need 200 times over the installed capacity today. And then carbon capture and utilization and storage, we need 100 times that for us to be able to get to a point where we can be able in 2030. It's a mix. Rather than it being one thing or the other, one has to be clear that there is no one silver bullet that will be able to get us to where we need to. The future is renewable as a whole. On the one end, you have to be able to understand that, the financial improvements that you have overall, and that will allow you to be able to bring on, advancement in industry and automotive players. It will have the largest impact, but we need to move to 10% of what we have today. Global energy material productions is still a big one. It contributes 10%, but we will need to scale up to 15% of that. And then travel and logistics contributes 5 to 10%, depending on where you are around the globe. And its reduction is directly linked. So you will be able, other industries, healthcare providers and everybody else, they have a similar correlation from production improvement costs that you bring on as compared to CO2 reduction. So there is benefit in order to call it in going renewable, but it is not going to be easy, and therefore it requires us to think differently about the kind of things that are they call it. The cost of emission abatement is on the one graph that is on the side. I say to everybody, this is a path. It is not a one day we wake up and somebody starts talking about us going towards hydrogen vehicles and being 100% renewable, and then it's going to happen just like that. And what you then need to be able to understand is that it is going to be a change of us iterating between, the internal combustion engine, mild, and full hybrids that we're seeing now coming into the market. We now are seeing plug-in hybrids being brought into the space. Battery electrical vehicles are picking up quite fast, but those in themselves have their own problem, in the sense that the disposal of batteries long-term wise is something we haven't thought through, and therefore we have to think differently. And then fuel cell electric is where we are now, and I'll show you some of the vehicles that are already in production and are in use. And then getting to a full renewable 100% and getting to hydrogen is the ultimate goal, but it is a path. And we estimate, those of us that work in this space and work in the hydrogen space, that we probably are about 10 to 15 years away from where the full adoption of the fuel cell electric vehicle is now the thing, and 100% hydrogen is going to be the order of the day. These are various train technologies that are available for us to acquire. And we are looking at some of this being brought into the country, probably circa 2027, 2028. Now, the trains on the bottom, they are actually battery trains. And when you look at battery trains, you're looking at them having a range of 80 to 120 kilometers. Now, my entire system is about 80 kilometers long. And therefore, what that will only allow me to allow me one trip on a pure battery electrical vehicle that doesn't recharge at every station. They are very fast and they will be compatible with the system. But this is where the game changer is. When you take these vehicles here on the bottom and you put a constant state fuel cell next to them, you are able to bring up the range from 80 kilometers to 100 to 120. From that to the last vehicle that was being tested that I've been on in order they call it in Germany is now doing over 1,000 kilometers on a single, what do they call it, refuel. How long does it take to refuel a vehicle with what do they call it, with hydrogen? It takes 15 minutes. And these are great efficiencies that if you think about it, 1,000 kilometers probably gives me a whole week of operation on a single refuel of what do they call it, of 15 minutes. And this is the kind of things that gives you the kind of efficiency that and net zero that or the zero emissions that you wouldn't think about at the current moment. One of the things that most people tend to forget is that the electric vehicle that you charge actually is using ESCOM power that actually pollutes in another part of the world. All you're doing is you're just simply pushing off your, what do they call it, your pollution to somebody else in Mpumalanga. And therefore, we have to think differently, and that's why we're talking about looking at different vehicles. Or this is the Concordia, the Coradia Eland, which is a train that is in operation in order they call it in Germany at the current moment. This is the vehicle that is already has done more than 1,300 kilometers, and it charges up or it gets refueled in 15 minutes. Brilliant vehicle. I've been on it. In the front here, it's written Waterstoff, which is loosely, what do they call it? Wasserstoff, which is loosely translated into it emits water. Now, there's also the bit that we don't talk about when we start talking about hydrogen and the refueling technologies that you need to be able to do some of this work is going to be a big part, and the production of hydrogen and bringing it to the point where you have this. Some of the work that we've been doing on our first and last mile integration. This is what we call an integrated bus. It's actually a South African innovation where buses are not made the way you used to make them you might have seen the buses being brought in into what do they call it, into the Gauteng province. You've got a person riding over a chassis and an engine. This allows us a bit more flexibility. Those vehicles are not easy to be able to convert, and these are much easier because what you have at the back of the vehicle is this cradle that currently hosts the diesel engine, and you're able to remove it and you can fit anything in there. So at the current moment, it's got a diesel engine. You can move it to a diesel hybrid. You can move it to a fully electric motor. Electric motor with a hydrogen fuel cell can also be brought in there. So you can go biofuel, you can gas hybrid. And this gives you the greater opportunity for you to be able to have a lifetime evolution of the technology that you bring into the space. This is the bus that you might have seen around the road. And this bus, actually, already as it is, it's designed on the same technology that you have here. So all of these buses are already ready with this platform in them. And one of the key issues with these buses that we've just bought and we've just replaced now is that they actually have, what do they call it? They have the ability for us to go out into the back of the vehicle, remove the power pack as it is right now, and then add a new power pack. To the fleet, very soon we'll be adding a fully electrical taxi and replacing our MIDI buses that we use at stations like Marlborough to be able to add these into the fleet. These two are already in existence, and we are intending to actually move quite fast to being able to retrofit a few of them as, what do they call it, as test vehicles to do what road tests with them. We have one electric bus that is testing around town. It's gold, but it does not have the, what do they call it, the Gautrain deagles on it. But we are testing as it is. And then the new energy vehicles of the future, these are the few vehicles that we're bringing on. This vehicle here, we're about to start production and bringing it into the country by in 2020, and we were disturbed by COVID. Now, there's also the issue of, when you talk about hydrogen, everybody thinks of moving vehicles. But now we're talking about stationary fuel cells, and hydrogen as a new power source is now a big part of what we need to do. And these are probably, for lack of, what do they call it, of a different way, these are hydrogen generators. They are constant state fuel cells that are, what do they call it, that are standing that are not mobile. And what that allows you to do, it allows you to bring on clean energy and flexibility and reliability and connectivity to the stations and to various buildings around what we do. This also allows you the ability for you to produce your hydrogen in order, they call it, in things that actually get brought in 20-foot containers. Why would we want to go in this direction? Here's one thing that I have and I own. I own a lot of real estate, a lot of parking that can easily be retrofitted, and we will be retrofitting it in order, they call it, in 2026 with solar panels to produce our own power for each of the stations. So as you can see here, this is Midrand Station, which is up the road from my office here. This is Centurion Station, which is the ability to have enough power produced for the station and also a lot of the neighborhoods around it. What do we need to do in conclusion is create for investment, plan for the long term, but invest for today. Hydrogen is the future of mobility. Develop a holistic mobility plan or a holistic pivot plan and adapt technology for more applications and migrate your plan up the value chain. As you can see, we are looking at producing our own hydrogen, also using our real estate to be able to produce our own energy as a whole. Prof, I will stop this part of the conversation here in order they call it, and I'll leave this on the screen as I, let me stop sharing because I can see. Prof, I want to talk about the next bit of it. The challenge with talking about a lot of these technical things and and all of that, is that we forget that in leadership there's actually a human being behind this leader that you talk to and everybody else. And the old model of what do they call it? And we've developed what we call monocultures in leadership. And those monocultures are, a way of doing things where, leaders are not supposed to, well, are supposed to not to be seen to have a heart. And we all, monocultures are when we all behave the same way because we've seen other people behave the same way and we believe that's the right way of behaving. And we are assuming that life has works like that. And it doesn't work like that. So one of the key things that we have developed over the years is that leaders are not supposed to see obstacles. And are not supposed to see what do they call it, impediments, or should actually try and find ways around their impediments. But it was Marcus Aurelius who said, the impediment to action advances action. And this is an important issue because you have to think differently about how you view your obstacles in order, they call it, in modern day leadership. What stands in the way becomes the way. And in actual fact, it is us having, when you look at the presentation I've just done for you now, it was us having challenges with COVID that actually pushed us to think differently. It actually pushed us to be able to say, how do we actually make sure that we can then be able to make our own money, be able to create our own energy, and create a different way of doing things. Some of the things that you also need to think about as you move away from the monocultures that we've created. An interesting book to look at, it's by Holiday Ryan from 2014, which is called Obstacle is the Way. And in that book, she actually talks about a whole lot of issues that relate to the fact that you embrace your obstacles, keep, what do they call it, keep doing what you need to do all the time. Now, as we move on from, what do they call it, from the issue of not trying to avoid, what do they call it, self-care becomes important as a leader. I've seen a lot of, what do they call it, of my colleagues and, what do they call it, and people who I that surround me end up in hospital, and we all, have, what do they call it, do not talk about these things. And you have to be able to think differently about the things that, what do they call it, that make you uncomfortable, and think differently about them as a whole. Now, one of the things that you need to do is, when you start looking after yourself, is keep a routine. The reason why you have to keep a routine is the fact that we've all heard about the speech of, what do they call it, of the man that says, make your bed. Because that making your bed is talking to you about you keeping a routine, and that routine actually allows you to think about life in small bits rather than thinking of it in, what do they call it, in big bits, and creating what's called fundamental attribution error. Because everybody thinks that you need to do the big things for you to be able to achieve your daily goals. Keeping what do they call it, a habit, actually creates a mood. And that mood allows you to be able to think differently about it. When you look at it at times, it's that when you are a child, routine used to create safety. You knew that I have to wake up in the morning, go to school, be in school, come back from school, and then come back from there, and you would enjoy. But when you're an adult, keeping a routine creates a purpose. And the funny thing about it is, like, the two feelings are similar to each other, because you feel in a space where you are at ease. When you have a purpose, you feel like you are at ease. But you also feel that what do they call it, you're safe, and it allows you to be able to create better ways of thinking, and for you to be creative. You cannot be creative if you do not keep a routine. It's an important issue, and you do not have a purpose for why you do things. If you are a leader for the sake of being a leader, and you do not have a purpose, and therefore what you do is, what do they call it, is just simply, you can go after the money and you will get it. But ultimately, the money does not create purpose. It just makes you a much more, affluent person than anything else. Routine in itself creates, what do they call it? Creates flow. And when you start creating flow is when you are in a space where you are able to actually think at your own pace. And when you think about your what do they call it, your own pace, you are able to create conscious decision making. A lot of our leaders are busy. And the question I ask is, you are busy with what? And do you have a time during the day where you stop and think? Or what when you stop and do the more important things, you asking me to come and speak here, to me, I'm at the more important things, sharing knowledge. Do you have the time to stop yourself and share knowledge? And that to me is it's when you are in flow. When you are in flow, you actually make more of your decision, less from fear and impulse, and you make much more conscious decisions more than anything else overall. The sort of second thing in order they call it in developing a conscious life and all of that, it's about you creating, what do they call it, social intelligence. I've seen a lot of people who actually, what do they call it, who actually get, for their own capability and know-how, get to be brought up into senior leadership, but they do not have social intelligence. They have this need to elicit strong emotion in every conversation that they are in. And it is not necessary. It is an important part for you to be able to know that you do not need to elicit strong emotions from anything. You also do not speak in definitive terms. A lot of people are absolutists. They actually, everything has to be exact. It's like when their thought is that, and that's the way they think. And that stops you from learning. When you speak in definitive, what do they call it? In definitive terms, it means you only know the truth. And when you only know the truth, your team will not will be very careful to speak in and around you. And also people that you interact with will struggle to be able to interact with you. And slowly, people will shy away from raising their own opinions. And that's the easiest way for you to be able to kill meetings. Also, without you speaking in definitive terms, speak with precision. Be clear about what you want to say. A lot of people use a lot of words. And I worry about that. And I don't know whether it's the new way of doing things, but a lot of people have a need to speak with a lot of words. And sometimes you can you can deliver a message with the smallest amount of words possible. You also have to practice healthy disassociation. Disassociation in its total form is actually a big challenge, but you have to practice what we call healthy disassociation. Or as we normally say, you don't have to get involved with every fight you get invited to. It's you can sometimes just walk away. It's not necessary for you to get involved with what do they call it, with every also, you learn when you have healthy disassociation to not have arguments with people that just want to win and do not want to learn. An argument should actually, or a discussion should actually allow you to be able to grow jointly. But also notice yourself when you are having the argument for the sake of wanting to win. And therefore, that becomes much easier for you to do. Ultimately, Professor, what do they call it? As I nearly conclude, I've become a politician since I've gone into this job. I conclude too many times. Remember, your primary relationship is with yourself. Now, this becomes important. Your primary relationship is with yourself. A lot of people have a need to have a lot of friends, but they do not understand that the actual more important friend you must have is yourself. You actually have to be at one with who you are for you to actually be able to have proper, genuine relationships. And that in itself is an important part. And ultimately, be at ease with what do they call it, with the uncomfortable feelings that you start having when you get to this point, when you have a primary relationship, when your primary relationship is with yourself. Some of the things that will happen to you is that you will feel lost and directionless. And that in itself, it creates the ability for you to create a more. It actually creates the ability for you to be at ease with left brain fogginess. And what we call left brain fogginess is that a lot of leaders think they must be technical and be able to be mechanical in their thinking. Whereas sometimes you must allow the creativity to just happen rather than you trying to get a method and a process of following from one place to the other. And that in itself is the mystery of what do they call it, of growing. Because when you develop what we call left brain fogginess, because remember, your left brain is where you make your technical decisions, how much money should you have, how much, how many people do you need to have in your business? And in itself, it stops you from what do they call it, from being able to, create and be creative as what do they call it. Ultimately, you get to a point in leadership where you're going to downsize your friendship cycles. It happens naturally to some people, but some people it doesn't happen naturally to them. You still want to look like, yeah, no, ngumchita, you want to be around the people that you've always been around. But sometimes it will. Now, I want to end this, what do they call it, this conversation with one simple thing. The quote that comes from the long walk to freedom, and I'll paraphrase it. The great, what do they call it, former President Mandela says, after you've climbed the hill, one of the things that you get to be able to, what do they call it, to realize is that how many more hills are still there to climb, and therefore dare not linger. You appreciate the view, but dare not linger. And I'll conclude it there, Chair, and what do they call it? Let's have a conversation.
Wow, perfect. Thanks, my brother. Thank you so much. What a way of ending our year for this platform. Thank you so much, my brother. Even for taking time really to educate us, to orientate us about the technical work around how train, because obviously we just go there, we take a train, we take a bus, we don't know what is behind everything. But really, this has been such a wonderful wealth of knowledge, and thank you so much for that. If I may just ask Tshepo, as our colleagues are preparing their questions or comments, is there any, if maybe you can share with us briefly, any future plans in expanding the line of the current line of Gautrain? We know that it's from Pretoria, or Pretoria, Rosebank, and that line, Marlborough, Pretoria. Any other plans maybe to include or to add other areas, if there are any? What are the target dates? Is it doable? Is it something that we can, as Gautengers, maybe think of?
Prof, if we ended this meeting and I didn't get that question, that would be, at least you asked it first so that I can get it out of the way. we have sort of the initial bit of it that we launched in 2017 had about 6 lines. It's the first line, which is the line that goes to Soweto. And it goes from Sandton, Randburg, near the Dome in Cosmo City, and then Little Falls, and then through the mountain to Roodepoort, and then from Roodepoort to Jabulani. That line in itself is part of the long-term expansion for us to go to the Vaal, to connect to the Vaal SEZ. And then we've got the line that goes to Boksburg and then ultimately ends up in Alberton. and reconnects back onto the high-speed line that goes to Durban. We've got the line that goes to Lanseria, that comes off the Soweto line. We've got the line that goes through Four Ways, Lone Hill, Midrand, and then Samrand, and then back onto the line. And then we've got the line that goes to Mamelodi. That was the plan that we published in, what do they call it, in 2017. In and around February, we will then publicly put out the new plan. The plan, we call it the Gauteng Super Network. The Gauteng Super Network then ensures that we almost go to every location in order they call it, and Kasi that is there in order they call it, and every part of residential dwelling around Gauteng will have some sort of a Gautrain or underground operating in that space. The decision that was made in 2013 was that rail will become the backbone of public transport in Gauteng, and therefore we're actualizing that. In the next few weeks, we will announce the bigger super line, and then we will also put the clear milestones for how we build the Soweto line, because we are 5 years too late, but we have to start as soon as possible.
So, Tshepo, when you are using the language, we have a line that is a present. So it's like you have. I know in your project management, it's something start from design. So it's not like start
Yes.
from putting the bricks and mortar. So when you say you have, it's something that already not that.
So the design is
Yeah.
already done. The design is already done, and start doing the big work probably in the late part of 2025.
Perfect. How expensive Gautrain is? There is this perception that obvious people who use Gautrain you've got to have money, and then now that you're planning to expand to these other areas, the issue of affordability, obviously in all the planning and strategy will be something that will be taken care of. That if you're taking the line to Soweto, not that they can afford, but Sandton and others, it has always been thought that's where people who can afford Gautrain will be. And then people from other areas, will they afford it?
So we've got multiple models so some of it we're implementing now, and then part of it we will start implementing so in 2026 the current contract expires, and then we're putting in a new contract. So post 2026, what we will have is that we will be setting the fares ourselves. So it's no more the responsibility of the operator to set the fares. So that gives me a whole lot more flexibility for me to actually set fares and lower the fares. But there's something that I always caution when we start having this conversation, that when you start talking about the user pay principle, so if you build something for 100 million rands, and then you then say, well, for me to be able to recover the money, I'll have to charge 100 rands to each of the people. For me to recover the money, maybe, let's say in 5 years or in 10 years' time. Now, what that means is that the user pays for the investment that we've made. Now, when when you start discounting what you do, so we also recognize that transport is a social service, which is what you're raising now. And as a social service, it has to be subsidized in a way. But when you go back to the user principle, then we decide that no, the commuter is not going to pay 100 rand. The commuter will pay 50 rands, but the other 50 rands has to be paid by somebody. And that's where the subsidy from government comes in. Globally, transport is what we call a negative concession. Even if you concession it out, government still pays in to be able to maintain the social service. So whatever discounts you bring actually creates a subsidization point. And that is always the argument that we have with what do they call it, with everybody, to be able to say, how much can we subsidize? And in essence, what are we able to do? And normally when you bring the bill and say, this is how much you can subsidize, you can make it. I mean, there are cities globally that have made public transport free. Uh, some of it was a political gimmick, and they've withdrawn what do they call the statements, but some have gone ahead with it and have made public transport free. But what we want is that somebody has to keep the operations whole. We have to do renewals. We don't have to wait like in some other rail operators where they had to wait 40 years and the trains were breaking down all the time for them to, what do they call it? For them to put in money. It's costing us 150 billion rands to replace the entire fleet. Whereas had the maintenance been done properly throughout the period and the life of, what do they call it, of the train. So you also have to do maintenance. All of this cost money. So we actually have to think through some of these things when we do we are putting together 4 unique products immediately now. So we've got a product for disabled people. We've got a product for scholars. We have a product for, what do they call it? What do they call it? We have a product for senior citizen. Myself and yourself will be retiring soon, Prof. So we need to have a product. I must leave some legacy for myself when I retire, so that we, what do they call it? So we'll have a product for senior citizens, but we also have a product for job seekers. And that product will be targeted at indigent families. It's much harder than I thought it was going to be. That was one of the things that I wanted to do in my first year of, what do they call it, of being the CEO. But the various databases for, who is actually regarded as an indigent family in the various cities keep those registers. But the minute there's something free, suddenly the database gets filled up. And so it's been very difficult for us to verify. The SASA database in itself has its own stories. So we're trying to find a way in between the various databases to be able to get the best way of being able to understand who should actually be subsidized. And then we're also looking at another way in which we look at it per area. So places like Marlborough, we will have a discounted fare, and that discounted fare will be different from anywhere else.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, any thoughts, any questions, comments to Tshepo is here. This is a golden opportunity just to ask him about, he's giving us his time, anything about Gautrain, about transport management in Gauteng. This is very important. So anyone who want to engage, and please do raise your hand, or you can do it via chat room before we close. We'll be closing any time now. But Tshepo, there's something very interesting you said in your introduction, and many citizens, not only in Gauteng but even South Africa as well, not that are not aware, but maybe they take it for granted. It was so fascinating when you said this is a flagship project of the Gauteng government. So this good project, it's a government project, obviously run by private sector. And I think Gauteng province as a government, it's got something here ready to capitalize on it, to celebrate, to show people that as government we've got something that we can be proud of. And now, speaking on my other cap as an analyst, I would say probably maybe that's something that really the government is not capitalizing on using, because we criticize a lot on what is government doing, but here there's this flagship project running so smoothly, well run, well led, well managed. but we really don't publicize it and talk about it so that the citizens know that whenever there is a certain problem we have, but at least there is something good that the government is doing as well. So I was so fascinated when you said that, is just saying that it's our government. Probably Panyaza really should be, even though this is if I remember if I remember, I think that would be Mbazima Shilo's legacy, that he fought very well to already started this project. But yeah, that's very, very good, and something that it's a good story that must be told out there. And then really so that we know that government, there are parts and pockets of government where I think that's a very, very good. It's not always doom and
I can't agree with you more, Prof. That I always joke with the guys and say, I have these vanity projects. One of my key vanity projects at this point in time is to tell the story of the Gautrain. I actually met what do they call it? I'm trying to remember, Budzweli's surname, and he was the first DG of the province. So the DG is sort of like the CEO of the what do they call it, of the whole province. And he was the first DG of the province. So he sat in the rooms where this decision was made. The most, goosebump raising thing he said to me was that the decision was made in 1995. And when you look at 1995, that's a year after what do they call it? We started to govern. And he was in rooms where, and he says that the story goes as the project was rejected 5 times by the then administration before, in actual fact. And that was, if you want to talk about the story of resilience and leadership, Ndatamuleke at that point in time, with him going back to Exco over and over again with the same project, repackaged 5 times. And I still say it's a story of leadership, and it's a story that must be told beyond anything else to be able to tell the future what do they call it, generations, about there was a point at which we used to make decisions. There's a point at which, and we can have that point again. Leadership is about us being able to be brave. It's a story of bravery. It's a story of a lot of things, and it was a riveting evening. That what do they call it? I spent about an hour with him. I had so many questions. It was just unbelievable. And we've actually decided, so we're going to start filming, what do they call it, in Feb, when everybody is back. And we're bringing back all these leaders. And one of the things that I want to do is I want to capture them on video, just speaking openly, not really what do they call it, creating a movie as yet, but just them telling the story of how the decisions were made. And I want to tell the story, in the living years. We shouldn't try and have somebody tell the story from another angle when a lot of them are no more there. All of them that were there when the decisions were made were all there. And my former chairperson was one of those people that then took over as the DG of the province from Budzweli. And it's incredible treasure trove of information. But those are the stories we must tell. And I agree, I couldn't agree with you more. This is a story we don't tell well enough. I see somebody I think has a question there. The hand is up.
Yes, definitely, Lerato More. Lerato, over to you.
Hi, Prof, and thank you very much, Mr. Kgobe, for a very insightful presentation. It was very interesting how you put it together. The technical part of your presentation was superb. I just have a question in terms of the hydrogen fueling of trains. Is Gautrain not overly optimistic in terms, overly ambitious and optimistic in terms of this project? Seeing that South Africa is a very water scarce country, and according to my understanding, and you can correct me please, you would probably need a large source of water to make this project a success. So my question is, are we there yet? And how long could it take these plans to have hydrogen trains? What is the plan? How realistic are your plans, and how long do you possibly see it taking effect in South Africa? Because I mean, Germany is quite an advanced country, and it could be working very well for them. But in the context of South Africa, are we there yet?
Brilliant question, Loreto. Can I come in?
Yes, you may.
Brilliant question, Loreto. You know, one of the things that we as South Africans are not, we don't try and educate ourselves about. Just down here in Secunda, you've got the coal to fuel process. That coal to fuel process that is employed by Sasol, one of its byproducts is hydrogen.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that hydrogen is regarded by the world as brown hydrogen. There's different types of brown hydrogen. Brown hydrogen is what they call it, is hydrogen that's made from fossil fuels. You've got red hydrogen, is hydrogen that made from the processes that comes from
gray hydrogen as well.
I chair one of the hydrogen conferences content committee, and one of the things that I've learned through probably the 3 years of doing that conference is that we already have so much hydrogen and it's not consumed by the world. The world is looking at going towards net zero, and they are looking for green hydrogen. And green hydrogen is hydrogen that gets produced from from solar, from energy that comes from wind, and various other power sources. Now, what we are going to do, and then in the bigger hydrogen plan that we have as a country, we will produce green hydrogen. But that green hydrogen will not consume by South Africans. South Africans, by their nature, will probably have the ability to more consume the brown hydrogen that is already in abundance as it is right now. And the green hydrogen would actually be sold to Europe. Europe has no ability of being able to produce its own hydrogen. The only country at this point in time that will produce a lot of green hydrogen in Europe and have the space for it is Ireland, and it will be based on their wind power in order they call it in that country. And that is why you will hear that Namibia has moved first to actually put down solar plants which are intended purely to produce green hydrogen. But that's not for their consumption in their own country. That is actually for them to resell it to Europe. And when you think about it, hydrogen in itself is one of our key resources for industrialization long-term wise. So we are not far off from the greater plan of what do they call it that exists in the country in itself. And I am not fussy about what do they call it, what kind of hydrogen we're going to use in order they call it in our trains. It's already produced by Sasol, and they are producing it in abundance. And we're already looking at putting down a few, what do they call it? So one of the things that we wasn't in my, what do they call it? In my bio, I'm also the interim CEO of the, what do they call it, of the Transport Authority of Gauteng. And what that allows me to do is allows me for me to be able to look at the planning for the whole of the province for transport in itself. One of the things that you find being powerful in our story, not only as Gauteng, but in our story as South Africa, is that the brown hydrogen that gets produced by Sasol does not require that much water. And that brown hydrogen can also be used in the production of battery of lithium ion batteries. And so there is a greater story that sits here that is actually that requires us to just concentrate on it and build the skills. You know, when I was talking about AI, one of the things that I spoke to you about was the fact that we have to prepare the what do they call the capability of companies to be able to implement AI. Hydrogen has the same problem. One of the questions that are key to what do they call it, to our deployment of hydrogen is the lack of key skills in what do they call it in the country. But in terms of acquiring hydrogen and what do they call it and moving in that direction, it's not a big impediment.
Okay. Thanks. And what's your take on the use of desalinated water for hydrogen?
So the desalinated water in itself, remember, it consumes energy in the process of desalination. The more bigger resource, and you will understand one thing about me. I'm more about opportunities more than anything else.
Yeah.
The greater opportunity we have is the water that sits in the mines. You know the acid main drainage story?
Yes, yes.
That is the greater opportunity you have in Gauteng. You know, if you can dance with that opportunity to be able to produce hydrogen, you will make a killing. So rather, I'm looking at you becoming our next billionaire in order they call it in Gauteng.
Yes, that's the plan. I'm
All
still in
the
the
all the
I'm still
best,
in the rand
Lerato.
and cents.
All the best, Lerato. All the best. I know
Thanks,
that
Prof.
is your area and you're very passionate about this. And thank you so much, my sister. Well done. Thank you. The very last one, Sibusiso. This will be our last question. Over to you, Dabizet.
Hi, thanks, Prof. Good evening, Babu Kgobe. So, Babu Kgobe, you've touched on two things that really, make me think very hard. Because when you are faced with a reality, be it at work or elsewhere, we tend to forget these things. And one being the social intelligence, and also the second one, the health association. I must admit, the second one, the health association, you know, I really get invited very easily when the situation happens. But yeah, this will remind me in future just to be careful on how I tackle those. That's the beauty of this forum here. Thank you so much. I must also say, partly I feel very bad because I had the opportunity in 2007 to work for Gautrain. There was lots of reasons that made me not to go there. And one being I was in another province in KZN, needed to move, but circumstances could not allow at that point. And then I lost out the opportunity, but that's how life works. I want to ask a question. So you touched on earlier in your presentation about the role of middle management, right? So what advice will you give someone who is in a middle management and also wanting to grow, the career, the development, and so on? You will understand there's a lot of people at that level at this stage. There will always be, and they all want to grow at the same time. It's sort of become like a red race. So what would the one advice you will give for one that wants to go, but also that is done in a manner that is ethical and that will really make one to stand out? Thank you.
Thank you, Spusiso. I can give you a lot of advices, but I want to go back to a thing that I talk about quite a lot these days. Have you ever heard of the concept of the red car theory? So this is how it goes. So if you speak about the red car theory, if I ask you right now, Spusiso, how many red cars did you see today? You'll tell me one or none. And in essence, what that does, but if I told you, Spusiso, tomorrow, if you see a red car and write it down, I'll give you 50 rands for that car that you saw. So every red car that you see, I'll give you 50 rands for it. What is going to happen with your mind? Your mind is going to start concentrating on seeing red cars, because red cars is how you get paid. And red cars, there's a stimulus to it. Now, the point of the red car theory and what they call it, and leadership and growth, it's about what you think about the most. Actually, is the most likely that you will actually be able to grow in that space. Your ability to be able to look at what do they call it? at different bits and pieces and ultimately be able to say, well, I am able to see a lot of red cars. Now, when you're looking to grow, the ability for you to be able to just think of, the same thing over and over again, where attention goes, energy flows. Where you concentrate, a lot of people say, I want to become a leader, but their concentration is on completely different things. So, and I know, so if you are a technical person, a lot of people are saying, no, I want to be a senior leader and everything else. But they concentrate much more heavily on their technical work. And I'm not saying it's wrong to concentrate on the technical work, but they neglect their growth on the other parts of their, what do they call it? The reason why I did this, what do they call it? This talk in two parts was for us to be able to see that growth lies in you being able to understand the technical issues and be able to grow in that space. But also growth comes from your self-awareness and the ability for you to think about the right things. If you change the what do they call it? If you change the things you think about, the world around you starts to change. And that is the importance of, what do they call it? Of what do they call it? Of the red car theory. If you start thinking about it all the time, it's not about thinking only, but you start being able to put yourself in spaces where leadership will allow, or you will allow yourself to grow in terms of leadership, that will create an opportunity already in that space. From my personal story, if I were to tell you one thing, and you said you had, what do they call it? You had the ability to work for the Gauteng and it didn't work out that time. At times when things don't work out, that actually is a good sign for you that that's not the time. And I'm not a religious person, I'm a spiritual person. And the thing I speak about the power of a delay. So let me tell you a story from a personal perspective. In 2020, I wanted to become the CEO of this entity. And I had been interviewed already, and what do they call it? And the decision was to be made. And when the decision was made away from me and somebody else was picked, I actually was very dejected at that point in time. But guess what? I would have lived through COVID as a CEO. And for me, the power that lies in that story is that sometimes it's not the right time for something to happen, and allow other people to be able to be there. And as we say, we will keep on clapping until it's our 10. We will keep on clapping for others until it's our 10 for us to be at the top. 4 years later, I'm in the role and I'm in a space where I can think creatively. Remember at that point in time, we were just dealing with COVID and trying to recover everything from the devastation that was there. Was I ready at that point in time to be able to do that? Looking back, I'll tell you upfront, I wasn't ready. And for me, it's what do they call it? It's one of those things that you take into life that says, well, sometimes things don't work out for a reason, and appreciate things not working out then. But who knows? You might end up working for us now, in order they call it in 2025. Don't give up on the idea itself, and don't give up on what do they call it on your own growth. Just a few ideas. Opportunity dances with those who are already on the dance floor. It's about you getting there. A lot of people think you need to have a title for you to, what do they call it, to be given an opportunity to lead. At times you lead teams without you having the title of manager or leader. And that's where we, what do they call it? Ultimately, similarly from the red car theory, what you seek is seeking you. And the thing about the red car theory is about you thinking about what you are seeking and making sure that you actually concentrate on it, and what do they call it, and you make sure that you grow with it as it is. That topic, well, Prof will have to invite me back to come and have a long conversation about that, and be able to give you a lot more insights. Let me leave it there.
Thank you very much, Sibusiso, and thanks very much, Tshepo. Definitely we will engage you again, my brother. There's a lot that you can share with this platform. Already, I'm so jealous because I can see a lot of our members already on holidays or maybe busy winding up and meetings and all those things. Just understandable, obviously, it's understandable. But we do have our YouTube channel for those who like to replay this again and again. Please go there. Yeah, but definitely we'll engage you again. Any closing remarks or parting shots, Tshepo, before we close?
Going back to what do they call it, to what Sbisiso was asking earlier on. As we look into what do they call it, I always say loneliness is an emotional condition that is not defined by the absence of company, but by the presence of an inner absence. Go find yourself. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, my brother. Thank you so much for such an insightful and informative presentation. We've learned a lot tonight about how train, about transportation, about all these things. That is why I'm saying definitely, I know your plate is full, you're so busy, but hopefully we'll get a gap again where you can come back and address us again. Thank you so much, my brother, for your humility, for your availability, and for your just to the great work that we are doing for Gautrain Management Agency. We are very proud of you. Thanks a lot. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for tuning in tonight. We will meet again next year. Obviously, we'll let you know when we'll open them next year, but definitely we'll just go and rest and make sure that you come back safe. We want to see you again next year. We meet every Wednesdays here. These are our master classes. We learned a lot from each other because we've realized, as I said, that leadership, it's a journey, it's not a destination. The session is adjourned now until we meet again next year, 2025. We'll let you know when we'll resume our sessions. But may God bless you and may God bless Africa. Thank you very much until we meet again. Thank you and goodbye. Thank you. Bye-bye.